In today's show, I'm looking back at the top 20 players for fantasy basketball over the last 2 weeks for category leagues and for points leagues. Michael Bolton.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com and at Yahoo Sports Australia. And you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. We're looking at the top 20 players. And remember, these are the top 20 players on a per game basis for the last 2 weeks. It is not an indication of what the top 20 players are in the league moving forward. It is not an indication of the top 20 players in real life in the NBA. Is not an indication of any of that stuff. It is literally what has happened over the last 2 weeks on a per game basis, how these players have ranked. So, enough of that. Let's talk about it as my watch starts playing an alarm. All right, on to category leagues to begin with. The number one player in fantasy basketball. Nikola Jokic is the number one player over the course of the season. He's the number one player over the last 2 weeks. He's averaging 24, 11, and 9. Those assists have started to come down. We thought they might find it hard to stick to that level. He's also averaging over 2 steals per game. So while he is number one at the moment, I don't expect him to be number one for the rest of the way because I think the assists and the steals are going to come down. He's also shooting at a phenomenal rate. Hasn't missed a free throw in his last 6 games, and that's on like 25 or 26 attempts. Shooting 57% from the field, only 24% from 3 as well. He's been awesome this year, there's no doubt. I think he probably pushes back to being maybe top 5 player. Number 2 is a player that's played only 1 game, and people will say, Josh, the players who play only 1 game, you got to take him out. And I don't agree with that, and I'll tell you why. I think it just gives you an indication of the games missed by some guys and how little we've seen these players, but also shows what they were able to do the last time they were out and what can happen in a one-game situation. These rankings don't mean anything. Players aren't going to be like, the player at number 3, which, spoiler alert, is the skater boy Zach LaVine. He's not going to be going, that's not fair that Jimmy Butler's ahead of me. Yeah, because he only played 1 game. No one cares. But on a per-game basis, Butler's last game, he played 36 minutes. He had 26 points, 10 rebounds, 9 assists, 2 steals, and a block. I think that gives you a good reminder of what Butler can do. Now, obviously, it hasn't been that good for him all season, and we haven't seen him play in 2 weeks. He's played 1 game. So that gives you what he can do. Get the steals, get some good field goal percentage, get assists, and score really well. So when you're looking at Jimmy Butler, just remember that. Remember, he can be maybe a top 25 guy this season when he comes back. At number 3, it is Zach LaVine. He's played 5 games over the last 2 weeks, 32 points per game with over 5 threes, over 7 assists, and the shooting number's ridiculous. 75% true shooting, including 52% from 3 and 63% from 2. This will not stick. I'm not saying LaVine is going to be bad, and he could very, very easily be a first-round player this year. He's 10th for the course of the season. He's 14th in my projections moving forward. But 52 from 3, 63 from 2, over 5 threes per game. That stuff is what's not going to stick. It's going to come down, and then his value comes down, but not by a huge amount. At number 4, another guy we've barely seen, just 2 games over the last 2 weeks, Brad Beal. And I don't know when we're going to see him again. He's averaging 38 points with 6 assists and a steal. Beal's the 7th ranked player this year, really establishing himself clearly as the number 1 player in Washington, which I guess wasn't in doubt, but it was more like, did the team recognize that? And did Russell Westbrook recognize that? And that has been the case, so that's good to know. And then at number 5, it's Kevin Durant, who's averaging 38 minutes a night. He's not going to play on Friday because he's resting after playing 50 minutes in the double overtime game. 34 points, 8 rebounds, 7 assists. I'm not sure that holds. 1.8 blocks on 55 and 85. He has been awesome. At number 6, it's his teammate, Kyrie Irving, who's only played the 1 game, and it was that double overtimer. 37 points with 3 threes in that game. He also had 3 blocks. Over the course of the year, he's the 5th ranked player on a per game basis. I think he does fall outside the top 10 as the season unfolds, but he has been awesome every game he's played pretty much. Number 7, Joel Embiid. 30 and 10 he is averaging in the last 4 in under 30 minutes with 2 steals on 58 and 85 on just an absolute mountain of free throw attempts. Over 11 free throw attempts per game during that time frame. Number 8, the fun guy, Kawhi Leonard.
I'm a fun guy.
27 points for Kawhi, 5.5 assists and 2.3 steals. And while I look at Durant and go, well, maybe something's unsustainable there. I look at Jokic's 2 steals and I go, that's probably going to come down. I look at LaVine's 3-point shooting and I go, that's probably going to come down. I look at Embiid's 11 free throw attempts. I go, that's probably going to come down. I look at Kawhi's 27, 4 and 5 with 2 steals and I'm not sure what's coming down there. Maybe the 56% shooting. Maybe the 60, well, not maybe, definitely the 61% from 3, but it just feels relatively sustainable. And now that this guy's playing back-to-backs, he is a clear first-round top 8 sort of player. At number 9, the Padawan Collin Sexton. He played 1 game. He had 42 points in it. He hit 5 triples. He had 2 steals and a block. He's the 28th player over the course of the season, so he's been really, really good. Him adding peripherals is what's going to keep him as a top 30 guy, getting some volume of threes, getting steals, getting assists. I don't necessarily have faith in that, but I think he can be like 24, 25 points with 3 rebounds and 3 assists and 1.2 steals or something like that. I think he can get to that number. And then number 10, it's Karl Anthony Towns, who was awesome before he contracted COVID in those 2 games back from his wrist injury. 25 and 13 with 2.5 blocks. Hopefully it's not too far away that Towns is back and then he's ready to roll as a top 5 guy for the rest of the season. At number 11, Damian Lillard. 29 points, 7 assists, 3 triples, 44, and hasn't missed a free throw on almost 9 attempts per game. So we're talking close to 50 free throws here. Just huge numbers from Lillard over the last 6 games. And he's going to have to shoulder such a large offensive load with no CJ McCollum and no Yusuf Nurkic.
Giggity!
Moving forward, Lillard's going to be great. Worse in points leagues, better in category leagues. We know that. But going to put up some big numbers here. Well, James Harden comes in at number 12, 23, 8, and 11. It's really hard to grasp Harden where he sort of fits the rest of the season. I think he's going to be top 3. Still in Brooklyn, he could be number 1. We just don't know how the usage is going to play out. At number 13, Nikola Vucevic, who's on an absolute roll, 26 and 11. Yeah, that's fine. 50% from the field, 92 from the line, 40% from 3, only 0.6 blocks. Look, absolutely nothing there feels completely unsustainable. Like, I'm digging hard to see what isn't he going to do. Maybe the 92% from the line, but everything else looks really, really solid. He is absolutely dominating this year as the 13th ranked player in the last 2 weeks and also the 13th ranked player over the course of the season. At number 14, it's the Beatle, Paul George, who's been shooting like 50% from 3 all season. That's going to come down, but this is sort of the area I thought he should have been drafted, and he's living up to that. While at number 15, the Wiki Chris Boucher has definitely exceeded my expectations. In the last 7 games, in only 28 minutes, he's averaging 19 and 8 with 2.5 threes and 2.7 blocks. Now, he is also shooting a phenomenal rate from 3. It's about 50%, so that is going to come down. And he's going to have those games where his minutes get lowered because he's struggling against the physicality of another opponent, so be aware of that. Don't view him as a top 20 player. Probably don't even view him as a top 25 guy, maybe top 30, because there will be some fluctuations, but he's been fantastic so far this year. Next up, at number 16, it is Shake Milton. 3 games for Shake, 30 minutes a night, 25 points on a true shooting of 73%. He's also added 1.7 steals, hitting 64% of his threes. He is going to suffer a massive, massive drop-off. This is not going to last. Not only is the shooting not going to last, but the usage isn't going to last. The minutes aren't going to last, and he's going to fall out, maybe outside the top 100 after the coming weeks. Number 17 is Steph Curry, just doing what he does, 27, 5, and 6 on 46% shooting. And then at 18, it's Luka Doncic, who when I did this last week, he was at number 1. So it's been a bit of a drop-off for Donch, who's down to 44 from the field and 70% from the line, averaging 24, 11, and 11. But it shows you that triple-doubles aren't everything in category fantasy leagues. He's averaging still 1.2 blocks, which I think will come down. But those subpar percentages are keeping him out of the top of the list. While the Donovan Mitchell.
He's Don. He's good.
Really strong run from Don, averaging 28 points a game, 4 threes, 51 from the field, and 91 from the line. That is the big improvement there from Mitchell. He's shooting 52% from 3, so it is going to come down. But he's only averaging 0.6 steals. Could he be a 1.2, 1.3 steals guy? That's what's important for him, is getting the steals and getting the free throws to the right level. And at the moment, everything is trending in the right direction, though I do fear some regression. And then at number 20, it's Bam Adebayo.
Bam, 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 bam.
20 points, 12 boards, shooting 91 from the line. This guy was a poor free throw shooter last year. And it's good to see him being able to improve that. Really thriving, I think, with the lack of Jimmy Butler. And when Butler returns, it is going to have an impact on Bam's numbers. The next 4 out were Jeremy Grant, Karis LeVert, Miles Turner, and CJ McCollum. Let's have a look now at the top 20 players in points leagues. At number 1, it's the Padawan Collin Sexton. He had dropped 64 points in that one game. And then Jimmy Butler's at number 2. He had 61 in the one game that he played. So they're both on top of the per game rankings for points leagues. Default Yahoo scoring points leagues. Number 3, it's Kevin Durant, who over the last 6 games is averaging 58 fantasy points. That's higher than the 52 that he's averaging over the course of the season. And I think it probably does settle under 50 when all is said and done for the rest of the year. Well, Nikola Jokic, he's had a great week. He's like great 2 weeks. He's averaging 57 fantasy points. But the fact that the 3 other guys are ahead of him there have pushed him down from number 1 overall down to number 4 over the last 2 weeks. He is still the number 1 player for fantasy points leagues. And then Luka Doncic comes in at number 5. Doncic is also averaging 57 points over the last 2 weeks. That's up on his season average. He is, I think, going to be a top 2 fantasy points guy this year. Him and Jokic are 1 and 2 so far over the course of the season. At number 6, it's Brad Beal. We spoke about him already in his 2 games. He averaged 56 fantasy points in those ones. No reason he can't be a 50-point-per-game scorer as we move forward. I think there is maybe some room for regression from there, some way for that to drop, but he's been great. Townsy comes in at number 7, averaging 52 fantasy points in the 2 games that he played, and then Kyrie dropped 52 in that game against the Nets. He's at number 8. Number 9, a guy that's going to suffer in a pretty big way, Andre Drummond, averaging 51 over his last 4 games, including a real turd against the Nets. I think that he probably, he's 11th over the course of the season. He is 9th over the last 2 weeks. I think he can drop outside the top 50. So if you can get any sort of top 30 guy back in it, look, I wouldn't trade him for a top 50 player, but if I can get a top 30 or top 25 guy back in a trade, I would do that. And then at number 10, it is Joel Embiid with 51 fantasy points per game over the last 2 weeks. Marginally ahead of where I expect him to be for the rest of the year, but not that far away. Number 11, it is the Skater Boy. Shout out to the guy who gave me that nickname for Zach LaVine. Appreciate that. Zach LaVine, 50 points over the last 2 weeks, as I said earlier, on some unsustainable 3-point shooting, but he's been absolutely awesome. 12 is Nikola Vucevic, averaging almost 50 fantasy points per game. He looks to be a top 15 player the rest of the year. 13 is James Harden, who is 5th over the course of the year. That's now his numbers over the last 2 weeks, 49 points versus 51 over the course of the season, aren't that different. But the fact that there's a lot of other guys with some big numbers have pushed him way down. And then Giannis Antetokounmpo at number 14. He's just doing what he does as well, averaging about 49 a game. I think he can get back to over 50. It hasn't been the case this season so far for Antetokounmpo. Hopefully he can get there. At number 15, it is Domantas Sabonis, who again looks rock solid inside the top 15 for the rest of the season. An absolute points league monster with all the minutes he's getting, the triple-doubles, the double-doubles, and the poor free throws don't really mean anything in a points league. At number 16, it's Clint Capella, the Kerner. He is absolutely flying at the moment, averaging 46 over the last 16 games. Clint is putting up some big numbers. Now, over the course of the year, he's still only at 39 per game, but really ramping it up. I think he can be a top 25 points league player this year with how they're using him, but there is some concern that when Gallinari comes back, it means more minutes for Collins at center, which will reduce a little bit of Capella's output. At number 17, it is Damian Lillard, who's doing what he does. This is where he ranks in points leagues normally, in that 13 to 17 range, so he's right on track. Well, Anthony Davis comes in at number 18. It's been a little bit of a subpar couple of weeks for Davis, who's marginally below his ranking on the course of the season, but he should be able to push back up into the top 10 soon. Number 19 is the fun guy. And then number 20 is Jeremy Grant, averaging a whopping 45 fantasy points over the last 2 weeks, which is 6 games for him. 27 points with 6 boards and 4 assists and 1.3 blocks. Do you think there's anyone else who would be the most improved player? I reckon it's got to be him. I don't think it's Christian Wood. I think it's going to be Jeremy Grant, to be honest. The next 4 out in points leagues rankings are Bam Adebayo, Victor Oladipo, Julius Randle, and Trae Young. They are your top 20 players in fantasy basketball. Leave a comment down below. If you're watching the video, hit the thumbs up, hit the bell for notifications, and subscribe. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and on the old YouTube. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.